It arrived wrapped in red silk, with her sister's handwriting on the note. She would later realize it was never meant to be a peace offering. The room was dim, curtains drawn against an afternoon that still held some of autumn's fading warmth, and Juliet understood, the moment the door closed behind her, that her sister had chosen the dimness deliberately. "Sit," Ye-jin said, gesturing to a low chair near the cold hearth. Her voice was careful, in a way Juliet recognized all too well, the same careful voice she herself had once used for years, back when showing too much of anything had felt like a danger she couldn't afford. Juliet sat, but did not look away from her sister. "Ye-jin, tell me what's happened." Ye-jin did not answer right away. She moved instead toward the small table by the window, pouring tea neither of them would likely drink, her hands betraying a faint, persistent tremor she did not seem able to fully hide. "You've heard the rumors, I assume," Ye-jin said finally, still not turning around. "The court is not as discreet as it believes itself to be." "I've heard that the crown prince has been in a foul temper," Juliet said carefully. "That you rarely leave your chambers. I told myself it might be nothing. New marriages are difficult, especially ones built quickly, under political pressure." She paused. "I don't fully believe that anymore. Not since your letter." Ye-jin's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "It started small," she said, her voice dropping lower, as though the walls themselves might carry the words further than she intended. Sharp words, after a poor day at court. "I told myself every marriage has difficult adjustments. I told myself he was simply tired, or frustrated by matters that had nothing to do with me." She set the teapot down with more care than the gesture required. "It didn't stay small." Juliet felt something cold settle into her stomach, the particular dread of watching a fear she'd been quietly nursing for weeks finally take on a shape she could no longer look away from. "Ye-jin," she said carefully, "has he hurt you?" For a long moment, her sister said nothing at all. Then, slowly, she drew back the loose sleeve of her robe, just enough to reveal what she had clearly been hiding, a pattern of faded bruising along her forearm, old enough to be yellowing at the edges, evidence of more than a single incident. Juliet's breath caught. "How long?" "Since shortly after the wedding." Ye-jin pulled the sleeve back down quickly, as though the sight of it herself was more than she could bear for long. "He is careful. He never marks anywhere the court might see. He is always sorry afterward. Flowers, apologies, promises that it won't happen again. And for a while, each time, I believe him. I think that's the part I'm most ashamed of. Not that it happens. That some part of me keeps believing it will stop." Juliet crossed the room and knelt beside her sister's chair, taking Ye-jin's trembling hands in her own, a gesture that would have been unthinkable between them in the life she remembered, and yet felt, in this one, entirely necessary. "This is not your fault," Juliet said quietly. "Whatever he tells you, whatever excuse he offers, this is not something you caused, and it is not something you deserve." Ye-jin's composure finally broke, tears slipping free before she could stop them. "I wanted this so badly," she whispered. "For so long. I thought if I could just have what you had. The crown, the alliance, my father's pride. I would finally be enough. I would finally stop feeling like the daughter who was always measured and always found wanting." Her voice cracked. "And instead, I got a husband who resents his own life so deeply that he takes it out on whoever is closest to him. I don't know if this would have happened to you too, if you'd stayed. I don't know if it's simply what he is, or if it's something particular to me." It was, Juliet realized, The exact question she had feared hearing since the moment the servant's careless words first reached her in the corridor. The possibility that Jae-won's cruelty had never been specific to her at all. That it had simply been waiting, patiently, for whichever woman the court placed in front of him. "I don't think it's something you caused," Juliet said slowly, choosing her words with care. "I think he is a man who has spent years letting his own resentment curdle into something dangerous, and I think whoever stood in that role beside him would eventually have borne the weight of it. I am sorry, Ye-jin. I am so sorry that weight fell to you." Ye-jin was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke again, her voice had shifted, not softer, but sharper, edged with something Juliet hadn't expected. "Are you?" Ye-jin said. "Truly. Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one who arranged for me to have this crown in the first place. You stepped aside so smoothly, so generously. Everyone at court still speaks of it, as though you performed some great act of sisterly love. And here I am, alone in a dark room, hiding bruises under my sleeves, while you spend your afternoons in orchards with a prince who adores you." Her hands, still held in Juliet's, went rigid. "Did you know, Juliet? Did you know what he was, and give him to me anyway?" The accusation landed like a blow Juliet hadn't braced for, precise and devastating in the way only a truth half-twisted into blame can be. "I didn't know this would happen," Juliet said, her voice unsteady now despite her best effort to keep it even. "Ye-jin, I swear to you, I never imagined." "But you knew something," Ye-jin cut in, rising from the chair now, pulling her hands free of Juliet's grasp. "You knew enough to want out of that engagement so badly that you convinced our father to choose me instead, in a single day, after a lifetime of never once fighting for anything for yourself. What did you know, Juliet? What did you see in him that made you so desperate to escape marrying him yourself?" Juliet stood as well, her own composure fraying at the edges. She could not tell her sister the truth, not the full truth, not the pendant, not the reign, not an entire lifetime lived and lost, without sounding as though she'd fallen into madness. And in the silence that followed, in the visible hesitation before she could answer, Juliet watched something in her sister's face harden into a shape she recognized far too well. It was the same look Ye-jin had worn once before in another life, standing over her in the rain. "I see," Ye-jin said quietly, when Juliet's answer did not come quickly enough. "You did know, and you let me walk into it anyway, so long as it meant you got to walk free." "That isn't true," Juliet said, her voice breaking now. "Ye-jin, please." "I think you should go," Ye-jin said, turning away from her, wrapping her arms tightly around herself in the dim, curtained room. "I don't know why I thought telling you would help. I think some part of me wanted you to feel what I'm feeling right now. I suppose it worked." Juliet left her sister's chambers with the same cold dread she remembered from a rain-soaked road years, a lifetime ago, though this time no one had struck her. No one had accused her of treason. No one had left her dying in the mud. But something had shifted, all the same, in the space of that single conversation. A blame had taken root, quiet and unfair, and utterly understandable given what Ye-jin had suffered, and Juliet understood, walking back through the palace halls toward the gates where Si-woo still waited for her, that this was not a wound that would heal simply because her intentions had been good. She had wanted, more than anything, to spare her sister a fate she herself had already lived and died inside of. She had not imagined that in doing so, she might simply be handing that fate to someone else, in a different shape, with a blame attached that would now be hers to carry as well. Si-woo was waiting exactly where he'd promised, near the palace gates, and one look at Juliet's face told him everything her silence couldn't. "Tell me," he said quietly, not bothering with a greeting. She told him as they walked, slowly, back toward the orchard that had become their quiet refuge. The bruises Ye-jin had revealed, the tremor in her hands, and last, the accusation that had followed, sharp enough to draw blood of its own kind. Si-woo listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening at certain details, his hand finding hers partway through and not letting go. "She's not wrong to be angry," he said finally, once Juliet had finished, "even if the anger has found the wrong target." "I know," Juliet said quietly. "That's what makes it so hard to simply defend myself against it. If I had never intervened, she would never have married him at all. I gave her this. Whatever she's suffering now, some part of it traces back to a choice I made." "You gave her a chance at something she wanted desperately," Si-woo said. "You didn't give her a husband who abuses her. That choice belongs entirely to him. It always did." "Try telling her that," Juliet said. "She's not wrong that I knew something. She just doesn't know what. And I couldn't find a way to tell her the truth without sounding as though I'd lost my mind." They sat together in the cold orchard as the afternoon light faded, and for a long while, neither of them spoke. "What do we do?" Juliet asked eventually. "We give her a way back to you, even if she isn't ready to take it," Si-woo said. "I'll speak carefully with people who could help, quietly, if she ever asks. But it has to begin with her willingness. If we move without her consent, we risk exposing her to consequences she hasn't agreed to face. And right now, I don't think she'd thank either of us for trying." Juliet nodded, though something in her chest refused to settle. "Then I'll write to her. Not today, but soon." She did write, 3 days later, a short letter, careful and unguarded in the ways that mattered, asking for nothing beyond the chance to be believed. It came back unopened, the seal unbroken, no note attached. She wrote again the following week, and again the letter returned to her hands untouched, as though her sister had simply stopped being willing to see anything Juliet sent, sealed or otherwise. "Give her time," Si-woo said gently. The third time Juliet returned from the gate, carrying her own unopened letter back into the palace. "Grief like hers doesn't move on anyone else's schedule." "I know," Juliet said. But the coldness of it, 3 letters, returned 3 times, without so much as a single word, settled into her differently than she let herself admit aloud. What Juliet did not know, could not have known, was what those weeks were doing inside the dim, curtained rooms of the Crown Princess's chambers, where Ye-jin sat alone with the unopened letters stacked on a table she never approached, and let a single conviction harden, slowly, into something colder than grief. She knew. The thought returned to Ye-jin at every hour, in every silence, in every fresh bruise she covered with longer sleeves. She knew what he was, and she handed him to me anyway. And now she sits in her orchard with a prince who has never once raised his hand to her, writing me letters as though ink could undo any of this. It did not matter, by the third returned letter, that some quieter part of her recognized the unfairness of the thought. Ye-jin had spent a lifetime being told she was not quite enough, not clever enough, not composed enough, not chosen. Not until Juliet had stepped aside and handed her the one thing she'd ever wanted, wrapped, she now believed, in a lie of omission dressed up as sisterly love. Enemy was too simple a word for what Juliet became to her in those weeks. It was closer to a wound that never stopped being touched, day after day, by every small kindness Juliet still, foolishly, kept trying to offer. The miscarriage came in early winter, quiet and devastating in the way such losses often are. Spoken of at court only in careful sideways terms. A private grief the palace physicians attended to, and then folded neatly into silence. It was not the first. Ye-jin had not told anyone, not even the physicians who tended her, that the bleeding had started the same night. Jae-won struck her hard enough across the ribs to leave her breathless on the floor of their chambers. Furious over some slight at court he'd carried home with him, like a blade looking for somewhere to land. She had not told them the first time either, months earlier, when a different loss had followed a different night in the same pattern. What she told herself in the long hours afterward was that a child conceived in that house had likely never stood much chance at all. Jae-won's grief, when it came, did not look like grief. It looked like fury, at the physicians, at the gods, at Ye-jin herself, standing over her sickbed and demanding to know what she had done wrong, what weakness in her body had cost him an heir, as though the answer might be found in the same place his hand so often found her. "You cannot even give me this," he said, low and cold, and the blow that followed was harder than any that had come. Before it, hard enough that Ye-jin heard something in her own wrist give way beneath her, hard enough that for one long, terrifying moment, she genuinely believed he might not stop. He did stop. He always did, eventually. And then, as always, came the apology. Flowers the next morning, a diamond bracelet by evening, soft words about grief and pressure, and a father who expected too much from a son who had never wanted the crown at all. Ye-jin took the diamonds. She wore the bracelet to the small mourning ceremony the physicians insisted on, sleeves pulled carefully down over the wrist that had not yet finished healing, and somewhere in the space between the flowers and the jewels and the wrist that ached with every movement, something inside her finished breaking that had been cracking for months. She did not decide to kill him all at once. It arrived the way the resentment toward Juliet had arrived, slowly, in fragments, across sleepless nights, spent staring at a ceiling she'd once believed would belong to a queen. She thought of the physician's stores, the ones she had learned, almost by accident, in the early weeks of her marriage, while pretending an interest in herbal remedies, for the headaches Jae-won's temper so reliably gave her. She thought of a particular root, bitter and nearly tasteless when ground fine enough, that the physician had once mentioned, in an offhand warning, could stop a heart within the hour if taken in enough quantity, with almost nothing in its symptoms to suggest anything but a natural, sudden failing. She thought too of Juliet, of the orchard, and the prince who adored her, and the unopened letters gathering dust on a table Ye-jin still refused to approach, each one, in her mind, less an apology than a taunt, a reminder of a happiness Ye-jin had been quietly, methodically priced out of the moment she'd said yes to this crown. "If I cannot have it," she thought, with a clarity that frightened even her, in the rare moments she allowed herself to examine it directly, then perhaps no one should. She began preparing 2 gifts that winter, in the private hours when her ladies had been dismissed and Jae-won was occupied elsewhere at court. The first she would give her husband on some quiet evening soon, folded into wine he trusted her enough, still, to pour for him herself. One final, terrible kindness before the end of it, she told herself, though she did not examine too closely whether it was mercy she intended or simply an ending she could not otherwise reach. The second was a small jade pendant, carved delicately, dusted along its inner clasp with the same bitter, near-tasteless powder, wrapped in silk, the deep, cheerful red the court favored for gifts, between sisters mending old wounds. She would send it to Juliet with a short note, an apology, she would call it, for the months of silence, and let the same hands that had once reached so easily for everything Ye-jin wanted close, one final time, around something that would take everything from her instead. The package arrived on an ordinary morning, carried by a palace runner, who announced only that it had come from the crown princess's household, addressed to Lady Juliet in handwriting, Juliet recognized instantly, achingly, as her sister's. She was not in her chambers to receive it. Si-woo had asked her, weeks earlier, after the coldness that had settled over the palace since the miscarriage, to let her household staff inspect anything arriving from outside before it reached her directly. A quiet precaution. Nothing more. Born of a prince's general unease, rather than any specific suspicion of the sister Juliet still hoped, against the silence, to win back. "It's likely nothing," Si-woo had said at the time, "but I'd rather be careful over nothing than sorry over something." Juliet had agreed, distracted, thinking only of court politics and old grudges among rival nobles, never once imagining the danger might come, wrapped in her own sister's hand. Haimi, the young maid who had served Juliet faithfully since her return to court, was the one who lifted the small package that morning, turning the note over first, with the mild curiosity of someone handling a gift meant for a mistress she was fond of. "For my sister," the note read, in Ye-jin's careful script. "I hope, in time, you can forgive the silence. I was not ready before now." Haimi smiled at that, glad in her simple way, for whatever this meant for the sisters she'd watched grow strained over the past season. She unwrapped the red silk herself, intending only to set the jade pendant safely in Juliet's chamber before she returned from the garden, so that the gift might wait for her. A small, hopeful surprise. The clasp caught against her thumb as she lifted it. Barely a scratch, hardly worth noticing. She was dead before she reached the chamber door. It was Si-woo who found her, less than an hour later, on his way to Juliet's rooms, with news of a minor court matter that no longer mattered at all the moment he saw Haimi's still form on the floor. The jade pendant fallen from her hand, the red silk pooled beside her like something spilled. The physician summoned within minutes confirmed what Si-woo already, with a cold and rising dread, suspected. A poison fast enough and potent enough to kill within the hour, absorbed through nothing more than a scratch against unbroken skin. "Who sent this?" Si-woo said, though he already knew, the note still clutched in his hand. Ye-jin's familiar script staring back at him with a cheerfulness that now read as something else entirely. Juliet arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion and the sound she made upon seeing Haimi's body, upon understanding, in the space of a single terrible breath, exactly whose gift this had been, and exactly whom it had been meant for, was not a sound Si-woo had ever heard from her before, not even on the rain-soaked road of a life he had never lived himself, but had come, slowly, to understand as intimately as his own. "She meant this for me," Juliet said when she could speak again, her voice hollow with a horror that went beyond grief. "Si-woo, she meant this for me." There was no time after that for careful diplomacy, for the slow deliberation that had governed every decision they'd made since Ye-jin's marriage began. Si-woo was already calling for the king's guard before Juliet had fully risen from where she'd knelt beside Haimi's body, his voice carrying an authority Juliet had rarely heard him use, cutting through the palace's rising panic like something forged for exactly this moment. "To the crown princess's residence," he ordered, "now, before anyone else touches anything sent from those chambers." Juliet rode beside him, the king's guard thundering ahead and behind them through streets that blurred past unnoticed, her mind caught between two unbearable truths she could not yet reconcile: that her sister had tried to kill her, and that some small, aching part of her still could not fully believe it, even with Haimi's still body left behind them in a chamber that should have been Juliet's own tomb instead. The crown princess's residence was silent when they arrived, a silence that struck Juliet even before she'd fully dismounted, as wrong in a way she couldn't yet name, the kind of quiet that seemed to have settled over the household hours earlier rather than minutes. The guards found the attendants first, clustered fearfully outside the private chambers, too frightened to enter, once their knocking had gone unanswered for the better part of an hour. Si-woo did not wait for ceremony. He pushed the doors open himself, Juliet a step behind him, and the sight that met them was one neither would fully describe to anyone else, not in full, for as long as they lived. Jae-won lay slumped in his chair near the cold hearth, a wine cup fallen from his hand, his face frozen in an expression somewhere between fury and confusion, as though even in death he could not quite believe what had been done to him. Ye-jin lay nearby, on the low couch beneath the window, her own cup emptied beside her, her face, unlike her husband's, utterly at peace. More peaceful, Juliet thought, with a grief that arrived faster than she could brace for it, than she had looked in months. There was a letter, sealed and waiting on the table between them, addressed to no one and everyone at once. Si-woo read it first, his hand tightening on the page as he did, before he passed it, wordlessly, to Juliet. "I gave him mercy he never gave me," it read, in Ye-jin's careful hand. "And I could not bear to leave anyone behind who might go on being happy when I never got the chance to be. Not him. Not myself. I am sorry, Juliet, that I could not manage to feel differently, even at the end. I hope, wherever you go from here, you understand that some part of me did love you, underneath everything. It simply was not enough to save either of us." Juliet read it twice, 3 times, searching for something in the words that might make the horror of the room around her easier to carry, and found, instead, only the same devastating clarity that had haunted her since Himi's death that morning, that her sister had wanted in the end, for no one left standing to have what she herself could not. She had simply failed, by the smallest and most unbearable of margins, to take Juliet down with her. The days that followed passed in the strange, muted blur that follows any death too large for a single household to absorb quietly. The court called it what it could bear to call it, a tragic end to a difficult marriage, a princess undone by grief the physicians should have caught sooner, a prince who had, in the official telling, simply succumbed alongside her. Only a handful of people ever knew the full shape of what the sealed letter had actually said, and Juliet, in the end, chose not to correct the kinder version the palace settled on. Ye-jin had suffered enough in life, without her memory being reduced entirely to the worst hour of it. King Tae-yang, grieving a son he had never fully understood, and a daughter-in-law he had failed to protect, named Si-woo crown prince within the month, not out of ambition on Si-woo's part, but because there was, in the end, no one else left standing who both the court and the alliance with Baekwa could trust to carry it forward. "I never wanted this," Si-woo admitted to Juliet quietly, the night the title was formally settled on him, the weight of it visible in the new stillness of his shoulders. "Not like this. Not built on what it cost to get here." "I know," Juliet said, taking his hand, "but you'll carry it better than he ever could have. Not because you wanted it, because you didn't." 1 year later. The orchard was in full bloom the afternoon Si-woo led Juliet there, the same quiet refuge that had held so much of their life together across 2 versions of it, one remembered only by her and one they had built, slowly and carefully, side by side. Lord Hanseo had come to her that spring, unprompted, with a rare and halting apology for years of comfortable distance he had never quite closed the gap on. An apology Juliet accepted not because it undid anything, but because she had learned, across 2 lifetimes now, the value of letting people be better late than never at all. Of Ye-jin, Juliet spoke rarely, and only ever gently, tending what remained of her sister's memory, the way she tended the small jade carving Si-woo had given her that first, impossible day. Carefully, privately, without pretending the grief of it had ever fully resolved into something simple. Si-woo stopped beneath the same tree where he'd once told her the truth about his mother, about a word that had once belonged to no one else, and knelt. "I have loved you across a version of this life I have no idea of, and now a version I helped you build instead," he said. "And I find I have no interest in discovering what a third one might look like without you in it. Marry me, Juliet. Not for the crown, not for the alliance it will finally, properly seal between our two kingdoms. Simply because I cannot imagine a single morning I'd rather wake into than one that starts with you." Juliet knelt with him, laughing through sudden tears, her hand finding the small wooden star still worn on a cord around her neck. "Biol," she said softly. The word that had once saved her, spoken now not as proof or plea, but simply as what it had always, quietly, meant to become. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. Above them, the orchard blossoms drifted loose in the warm spring wind. And for the first time since a rain-soaked road in a life she barely let herself remember anymore, Juliet let herself believe, fully and without reservation, that she had finally, truly, come home. The end.